Easter Island, or Rapanui, as it's known to its indigenous inhabitants, stands as one of humanity's most misunderstood places. This remote speck in the vast Pacific Ocean, famous for its mysterious Moai statues, has become a cautionary tale of environmental collapse and societal suicide. But what if almost everything you've heard about Easter Island is wrong? For decades, popular narratives have painted a grim picture, a once thriving civilization that devoured its resources, chopped down every tree, and descended into warfare and cannibalism, a perfect parable for our own environmental anxieties. Yet recent archaeological and historical research tells a dramatically different story, one of resilience, adaptation, and colonial disruption rather than self-destruction. Let's journey beyond the myths to discover the true story of Rapa Nui, a tale that might offer more hope than warning for our own environmental future. The conventional account begins with Polynesian settlers arriving on a lush, forested paradise around 1200 CE. According to this story, they proceeded to cut down every tree to transport their massive stone statues, triggering environmental collapse, starvation, and eventually societal breakdown. This compelling narrative gained worldwide attention through Jared Diamond's best-selling book, Collapse, where Easter Island served as the perfect cautionary tale of environmental suicide. Diamond wrote that the islanders had committed ecocide, and that the meaning of Easter Island for us should be chillingly obvious. But this version of history contains fundamental misunderstandings about the island's ecology, the purpose of the Moai, and the actual causes of population decline. Recent paleoecological research reveals that Easter Island was never the tropical paradise of popular imagination. The island's volcanic soil and isolation limited the diversity of plant species from the start. The palm trees that once covered the island were already in decline before human arrival due to climate changes and the activities of native rats that came with the Polynesian settlers. Dr. Terry Hunt and Dr. Carl Lipo, archaeologists who have conducted extensive research on Rapa Nui, argue that the islanders were actually practicing careful environmental stewardship rather than reckless exploitation. Their work suggests the Rapa Nui people developed innovative agricultural techniques like lithic mulching, using volcanic rocks to protect crops from wind and conserve soil moisture, that allowed them to farm successfully despite challenging conditions. The Moai, those iconic stone statues weighing up to 82 tons, have long been seen as symbols of competitive excess that drove ecological destruction. The traditional narrative suggests rival clans built increasingly larger statues, requiring more trees for transportation until the forest was gone. However, archaeological evidence tells a different story. Hunt and Lipo's groundbreaking research demonstrated that the statues could have been walked to their platforms, using ropes and teams of people working in coordinated rocking motions, a technique requiring minimal timber resources, but significant social cooperation. Far from representing destructive competition, the Moai may actually reflect a remarkably cooperative society. The statues likely served as symbols of ancestor veneration and markers of freshwater sources, crucial for survival on an island with no permanent streams. Their placement around the island's perimeter suggests they were part of a sophisticated resource management system rather than mere status symbols. The archaeological record shows no evidence of warfare before European contact. The obsidian spear points, often cited as weapons called mata'a, show wear patterns consistent with agricultural tools, not weapons. The islanders' investment in shared infrastructure and lack of defensive fortifications further suggests a cooperative rather than competitive society. If the Rapa Nui didn't destroy their environment and themselves, what actually caused the population decline that European visitors observed? The answer lies in the devastating consequences of outside contact. When Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen arrived in 1722, he estimated a population of 2,000 to 3,000 people living in an organized society. By the 1870s, after multiple European visits, the population had plummeted to just 111 individuals. This catastrophic decline wasn't the result of internal collapse, but of familiar colonial patterns: introduced diseases, slave raiding, and forced relocation. In 1862, Peruvian slave raiders captured approximately 1,500 Rapanui people, about half the island's population, including the king, priests, and those who could read and write the indigenous Rongorongo script. Only 15 survivors ever returned, bringing smallpox with them. Chilean annexation in 1888 further disrupted traditional life, with the remaining population confined to a single settlement, while the rest of the island was converted to sheep ranching. This colonial history, not ecological suicide, explains the dramatic cultural and population changes on Rapa Nui. Among the most fascinating aspects of Rapa Nui culture is Rongorongo, a system of glyphs that represents the only form of writing native to Oceania. These inscriptions, carved on wooden tablets, remain largely undeciphered, though they appear to contain genealogical information and possibly religious chants. The loss of Rongorongo literacy coincided with the Peruvian slave raids that captured the island's intellectual elite. This cultural devastation, not internal collapse, explains why modern researchers struggle to understand this sophisticated writing system. The existence of Rongorongo itself contradicts the narrative of a primitive society in decline. Developing a writing system represents a significant intellectual achievement, suggesting a complex, stable society rather than one in the throes of collapse. Perhaps the most persistent myth about Easter Island concerns deforestation. While it's true that the island lost its palm forests, recent research suggests this process was more complex and gradual than previously thought. Paleobotanical evidence indicates that the island's native jubea palm was already vulnerable before human arrival. These slow-growing trees were poorly adapted to the island's changing climate and the introduction of Pacific rats, which ate the palm seeds and prevented regeneration. Rather than reckless deforestation, the archaeological record suggests the Rapanui practiced careful resource management. They developed stone gardens, manavai, to protect plants from wind and salt spray, and lithic mulching to conserve soil moisture. These innovative agricultural techniques allowed them to maintain food production despite challenging environmental conditions. The absence of timber didn't represent failure, but adaptation. The Rapanui shifted to using grasses for fuel and built stone chicken houses to protect this valuable protein source. They created rock gardens that used stone placement to create microclimates for crops. These innovations represent sophisticated responses to environmental challenges, not desperate measures amid collapse. Today, approximately 7,700 people live on Rapa Nui, about half of whom are of Rapanui descent. After decades of Chilean control, the island has gained increasing autonomy, and indigenous cultural practices are experiencing revival. Modern Rapanui continue to challenge the narrative that their ancestors destroyed themselves. As Rapanui archaeologist Sergio Rapu has noted, "We never had a collapse. We are still here." Tourism now drives the island's economy, with visitors drawn by the very Moai that were once seen as symbols of folly. In a fitting twist, these monuments to ancestors now help sustain their descendants. The true story of Easter Island is not one of ecocide and self-destruction, but of human ingenuity, cultural resilience, and colonial disruption. By moving beyond the myths, we gain a more accurate understanding of this remarkable place and its people. This revised narrative doesn't diminish environmental concerns. Resource limitations and ecological change are real challenges, both for the ancient Rapanui and for our global society. But it suggests that human societies can adapt to environmental constraints without collapse when they develop cooperative solutions and sustainable practices. Perhaps the most important lesson from Easter Island is not about the dangers of environmental destruction, but about the dangers of misunderstanding other cultures and their histories. By listening to indigenous perspectives and examining evidence carefully, we can move beyond simplistic parables to appreciate the complex interplay of culture, environment, and history that shapes human societies. The Moai still gaze across Rapanui's windswept landscape, but they stand not as warnings of human folly, but as testaments to human creativity, cooperation, and endurance, a message we would do well to hear.